And I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Miroslav Jenka and Madam Idem Wosurnu for their valuable briefings. Madam President, the situation in Ukraine continues to be critical as the military confrontation continues between Russia and Ukraine. The situation still threatens international peace and security and is deeply complex, necessarily negatively affecting any prospects for a breakthrough between the parties. The continued military operations continue, unfortunately, to claim innocent lives, including children and women. The humanitarian suffering continues to increase. The numbers of injured and displaced persons continue to rise, and they struggle to remain alive. The infrastructure is increasingly being destroyed, limiting persons' ability to remain resilient or to begin recovery. In this context, Algeria has always expressed and continues to express its deep concern as a result of the targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure. Such targeting violates the rules of international law, including international humanitarian law. We must also mention that the impact of this war continues to negatively affect different regions of the world, in particular developing nations. Supply chains are disrupted, and the economic shocks are affecting food and energy markets, and continue to do so. Madam President, in this context, we would like to focus on the following points. 1. Algeria reiterates the need to prioritize the protection of civilians who bear the brunt of this war and who are most likely to suffer. We must guarantee the protection of civilian infrastructure, and we call for respecting the legal obligation to protect civilian infrastructure. Civilians must be spared from the cycle of violence and destruction. Second, we would also like to reiterate the need for the parties to commit to inclusive and constructive dialogue and to refrain from acts that undermine the prospects of a peaceful settlement. Further polarization will only fuel division and impede a political solution. We further call for an urgent resumption of dialogue and direct negotiations as the only path toward a sustained peace. On the contrary, warfare has proven its failure to achieve progress toward a ceasefire or a peaceful settlement. Third, we encourage the ongoing political and diplomatic efforts aimed at bridging the differences between the parties. We also reiterate our call on the international community to create the conducive conditions for negotiations and to facilitate constructive dialogue in a manner that guarantees the peaceful settlement and the continued consultations between the parties towards a lasting peace. In conclusion, Algeria reiterates its commitment to joint efforts in support of diplomacy and in pursuit of dialogue, understanding, consensus, and eventually a mutually acceptable, fair, and lasting peace. Such a path would be aligned with the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, and such a path must take into consideration the legitimate security concerns of the parties in order to maintain international peace and security. Thank you, Madam President.
Representative of Algeria for his statement.